If you've been training to this, it's time to stop. Gun fam, what's up? It's the Gun Brother. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm sure if you've been training shooting for any amount of time, you know this sound right here. All right, so let me start this off with a quick story. So about 10, 12 years ago, maybe not that far back, 8, 9. But anyway, transitioning some officers to turning targets. So in other words, these are seasoned officers. They've been doing qualifications for once or twice or 3 times a year, depending on how many jobs they have, for years. They know the course of fire, all of that stuff, okay? Experienced shooters. This is when I was working at PSTA, Protective Services Training Academy, and this was the first group of officers to come in. They were transitioning from responding to a whistle to turning targets. So this was their first qual ever doing it. This was definitely my first qual running it. I don't know about some of the guys that may have worked there before me, but I know this was this group of officers' first time. So we got a line of, I think, 12 officers. We give them the command. When the target faces, you will draw, you will fire 1 round, bent elbow position and holster. You have 2 seconds. Press the button, target's faced, targets went away. Not one person even drew their firearm. From years of training to an audible response. That is what led me to even start investigating this and to this opinion about training. And I also believe that this is one of the differences between training for quals or competitions and training for real life situations, or what some people would like to call tack shooting or actual shooting, whatever. That's a whole nother video. We gotta stop fighting about that too. After a certain degree, shooting is shooting. But anyway, back to this. What I learned as an instructor, because I wanted to figure it out, because even after that, what would happen was, and this happened to me as well, although my drop wasn't as big, I'd been training these officers for years already. So I have usual suspects that I know are gonna struggle, people that are gonna pass, and then people that are gonna shoot exceptionally well, which I consider no misses. It doesn't necessarily translate to a perfect score, but all the rounds are on the target. The people that struggled failed. I mean, they miserably were way off. People that were marginal failed. People that shoot exceptionally well, and like I said, including myself, my point drop was 7 or 8, but a lot of people's point drop that still passed was about 20 points, 10 to 20 points. Their first few times shooting on turning targets. So that's what led to me researching to a certain degree what the issue is, obviously, so I can train people better on it. And what I learned was, number one, your reaction to sound is technically, and I say technically for a reason, it is technically faster than your reaction to something that you see. The reason I say technically, because the margin is very small. It's like 20 milliseconds or something like that. But that is not the issue. The issue is you're training the wrong neural pathway to respond to a visual stimulus. So if you're training to this, I got it on random. So if you're training to this, or that, or any other sound for that matter, and not to a visual stimulus, you're training the wrong neural pathway to react to a visual threat. So your reaction is going to be delayed. You have already trained your body to respond visually a certain way. It may be running, flinching, or putting your guards up or whatever, but you haven't trained it to draw a firearm. So you may see a threat and you're gonna, 9 times out of 10, do something else. And it might be quick, maybe very quick, but you're gonna do something else before you draw the firearm, because that's what you've trained your body to do for your whole life. Conversely to that, and I teach this in my concealed carry class a lot, in a live situation or a threat situation, you do not want to respond to an audio stimulus. In other words, we don't shoot at sounds, and we're trained that through the movies. Somebody is, especially horror movies and things like that, somebody's moving through the house and they hear a broom fall or the cat runs past something over here. What do? They start shooting at it automatically. That's responding to an audible stimulus. We do not want to do that. Our fingers shouldn't even be on the trigger, because that audio stimulus can also just startle you and our hands clench up. That is one of those things, one of those issues with trigger finger discipline. Somebody could yell, a horn could go off, something could drop, just anything, just any audio stimulus triggers that response if you've been training that way. Now, of course, not everybody's gonna do it. To the people that just, I know you're gonna say it in the comments, I've trained to that for years, whatever. This is my training experience, and this is my advice to people. I've even had that happen on the range where I am running a qual to a whistle, and maybe people are firing on another range or something like that, and I'm watching everybody, and I haven't blown the whistle yet. I'll give the command, whatever the command is, and I'll say stand by. They'll hear a shot go off on another range, or a tone, or whatever it may be, and flinch to go to draw, because they're listening for something to trigger their reaction to shoot instead of looking for something. My experiences, and like I said, those are facts, and I do believe that, and this has its place. If you're training for competitions, obviously these measure your time. I'm not saying that these are useless. I'm just saying that this is not the right training for a real life stimulus, because that real life stimulus is going to be visual. You have to identify your threat. You have to identify your threat, what's beyond it, what's before it. All of this stuff is visual. None of it is audio. Somebody may scream. That doesn't mean start shooting. That means look to see where the scream is coming from, see if you see a threat. All your stimulus to start to respond with deadly force, most of it is going to be visual. Even if you hear gunshots, you don't just draw and start shooting at the shots, because that could be a police officer or one of your family members responding to a deadly threat. It could be anybody. So you still have to visually identify the threat before you make the decision to respond with deadly force. That is all, most of that is visual. I'm not gonna say none of it is sound, but most of that is visual. So you have to train to be able to respond visually, or to respond to visual stimuli for your decision to use deadly force. Now, what are some alternatives? The problem is, obviously, most ranges are not equipped with turning targets, or a lot of them aren't. And so, yeah, I'd say most aren't equipped with turning targets. So that's your number one solution, to be able to shoot at turning targets. In other words, the threat is edged and you don't respond until the threat presents itself. I've been in classes where the instructor will have numbered targets, or colored cues, or just different objects. And even going to the point where we would face away from the target, the instructor would call out blue 3 balloon. So when you turned around, you had to identify those objects before you could start shooting at them. So, and you have to get creative with it. Obviously, simulators are good as well, because they give you're responding to a visual stimuli, and a lot of people's initial scores, especially if they're used to training the sound, their initial reactions to visual stimuli on simulators are low or slow, because they're so used to waiting for an audible cue to begin shooting. We do have to respond visually to threats, and to respond visually to threats quickly, you have to train to respond visually. If you're training for sound, while you are acquiring that motor memory, or the brain memory to activate your muscles, because muscles can't remember anything, let's not get into that. If you guys agree or disagree, let me know in the comments, especially if you agree, and if you have ways of training for a visual stimulus, put them down in the comments. Of course, turning targets is not the only way to do it. And as an instructor, I'm always open to other ideas and things like that, in ways that we can train that visual stimulus, because We cannot always just shoot the sound. So with that being said, thank you for tuning in. The Gun Brothers out. I will talk to you guys soon.